It all started in southern Quebec, in a town called Oka. There was a long history behind the crisis at Oka. Since the 18th century, the Mohawk had been pressing the government to recognize the right to land in the area, but their requests had been largely ignored. In 1961, a 9-hole golf course was built on the land that had been claimed by the Mohawk of the Kanesatake Reserve as their commons, known as the Pines. Despite protests that the land included a burial ground, the Mohawk claim was rejected, and the golf course was built. Despite protests by the Mohawk of the Kanesatake and concerns expressed by both the Quebec Minister of the Environment and Minister of Native Affairs, construction was still scheduled to begin. And that's why my thesis is that during the Oka Crisis, the government treated the Aboriginal people unjustly when their titles to land and independent rights were overlooked and ignored by the Canadian government, as they forced conformity and compliance of them. In particular, when the government rejected the Mohawks' land claim, when the Surete du Quebec aggressively attacked the Mohawk barricades using tear gas and concussion grenades, and lastly, when our government refused to negotiate at all with the Mohawk people. It was now the Mohawks' time to take action, and that they did. After the authorization, the protesters made barricades with Kanawaki and Akwesasne reserves. After 2 injunctions to remove the roadblock were ignored, the mayor of Oka felt like he had no choice and asked the provincial police force, the Surete du Quebec, to intervene. On the morning of July 11, 1990, the Surete du Quebec attacked the barricade, using tear gas and concussion grenades to create confusion. Suddenly, a brief gunfight took place, and just like that, Officer Corporal Marcel Lemay was killed, and the Surete du Quebec retreated. Tensions were high after the death of Officer Marcel Lemay. More supporters joined the Mohawks, while other sides seemed to prepare for war, at whatever it takes. The Mohawks formed blockades, specifically over by Mercier Bridge. They cut off access between Montreal's southern suburbs and the island of Montreal. After the retreat of the Surete du Quebec, the Mohawks grew in number and in power, by taking over police cars and destroying them to use for blockades and taking over the Mercier Bridge. It seemed that the Mohawks had the upper hand. But this was until Quebec Premier Robert Bourassa requested the help of the Canadian Armed Forces, and 2,500 regular and reserve troops were put on standby. On August 20th, about 800 members of the Royal 22 Regiment took over from the Surete du Quebec at the Kanawaki and the Kanesatake barricades, assuming a position only meters from the warriors. The Mohawks were outnumbered and outpowered, especially considering how close the two sides were together. But still, no matter what, the Mohawk people went face to face with the army to prove that they will fight for what is rightfully theirs. This event got lots of attention from the media and was broadcasted and documented all throughout the time. The protest lasted until September 26, 1990, when the Mohawks dismantled their guns and surrendered to the army. The Oka Crisis showed many issues with Aboriginal affairs and how unjustly they were treated. The Oka Crisis played a large role in establishing the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Rights. In the end, although the land will be preserved, it is still not in the hands of its rightful owners, the Mohawks.